All right, so our next presentation will be Vince and Dominique. These two students, Dominique was also a BSMS student. I think she graduated one semester BS after Ashanti. So Vince and Dominique have a little bit more of a unique project because they were supported on an external grant that I had from the Construction Industry Institute. So their project has actually gone on for a couple semesters. They've started actually last academic year working on this and going from there and serving as research TA. So I'll let them take over and let me go ahead and unmute them as well so we can go ahead and get started here and we'll take it away.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, Dominique, you there?
Yeah. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Gotcha. All right, so my name is Vince Schiavone, and my partner is Dominique Hawkins. Like Professor Scott said, we worked with her for about 18 months on this project, and it's a maturity model for collaborative scheduling. Next slide, please.
Okay, so here's just the table of contents, and similar to Ashanti, I think we'll just jump right in because we have a lot to cover. So next slide, please. Okay. So in any team setting, collaboration within the project team is a crucial input for success. And so you always want your project team to be working towards the same end goal, as well as you want to have an established environment where open communication is promoted. And so the goal of this research is to create a framework that can be used throughout the construction industry to weigh a project's level of collaboration. And so, okay, and so this tool, for this tool, we use the two following inputs. So one of our inputs was the examination of current collaborative scheduling techniques. And for this portion of the project, we use survey responses from industry professionals. And then throughout the entirety of the project, we worked really closely with the team of 11 subject matter experts. And that team was made up of international experts with job roles such as project control specialists, scheduler, planners, project managers, and operations professionals. And so essentially what this tool will do is it will allow industry professionals to input information about their own personal projects, and then based on the logic of the tool, the project will either be labeled as bronze, silver, or gold. And so a bronze project would be the lowest ranking that you can get, so it's the least collaborative. Then there's a silver level, which is moderately collaborative, and then gold is the highest ranking that you can get at most collaborative. Next slide, please. Okay, so what really drove this research was that there's been little to no focus on project schedule and collaboration within the construction industry. Currently, many project teams operate in silos. So there's a lot of focus on lean scheduling methods, such as last planner system. And if anyone on the call isn't familiar, last planner system consists of developing and using several key plans along with weekly meetings for scheduling. But for that example and for all other kind of lean scheduling methods, it doesn't necessarily ensure that there's good team collaboration. And then another part of the problem is that when there's no project team collaboration, there's a lot of misalignment of KPIs or goals across the project team. So kind of what I touched on before about just wanting a team that's always aligned and working collaboratively towards the same goal. And then lastly, not collaborating is definitely a potential detriment to the success rates of a project. Next slide.
Okay, thank you, Dominique. So this project was funded by the Construction Industry Institute. Like I said, we'd been on this project for about 18 months, and it was actually a follow-on to a previous project. So many of our members in the focus group, our subject matter experts, were part of the previous project. The big thing that came out of the previous project is a definition for collaborative scheduling, or what it is. As you can see it on the screen, it's a comprehensive process that aligns and engages stakeholders throughout the life cycle of the project in order to coordinate activities and resources on a project and achieve its goal. So using this definition, next slide, please. Using this definition for this project, RT362, we got back in a room with these subject matter experts. We used the definition of collaborative scheduling as our base, and we asked 6 questions to this group of people to get a good, strong dialogue. And it lasted over the course of 2 days. And what we pretty much came up with for this model is our pillars of collaborative scheduling and then swim lanes within each pillar. So if you take a look at the graphic here, on the left side of each of these rectangles would be the pillars: scheduling significance, planners and schedulers, representation, goal alignment with owner, and communication. We found that with our group, that these 5 pillars were the main aspects of collaborative scheduling, with different swim lanes that we called them underneath each pillar that could affect the outcome of any one of these categories. So after we got agreement for this, next slide, please. After we got agreement for the pillars and the swim lanes, we began defining each one individually. So obviously this model is going to be fairly large, and we can show the whole model at the end with questions, but we're going to take a look at one particular pillar, and then even so, with our survey and scoring, we're going to take a look at only one swim lane. So if you take a look, one of our pillars was scheduling significance. This was our very first pillar, and it could be argued that this is one of the most important since it set the priorities of our model. So the definition of scheduling significance that we came up with was the value that a project team and stakeholders place on creation, use, and management of a schedule. And then within this swim lane, we found that there would, or within this pillar, we found that there would be 6 swim lanes that we could test industry to score a project based on how significant the schedule was and how it was used. Next slide, please. So as I said, we're only going to show one pillar here, and we're only really going to talk about scoring and recommendations for one single swim lane creation, but we made 5 of these pillars. So you can see it's pretty involved, and this is only one part of the model, but this is to show that these are the swim lanes that we consider important when talking about the pillar scheduling significance. And then if you go across and look at bronze, silver, and gold, typically when an industry person would respond to our survey and try to score their projects, they could fall in any one of these 3 categories, which could then be mapped to collaboration. Next slide, please.
Okay, so the survey responses from industry professionals at the 2019 CII conference served as our sample set for the testing of this model. And just to clarify, CII stands for the Construction Industry Institute. And so what we did was this past summer of 2019, we went to the CII conference in San Diego, and we distributed this survey to a number of industry professionals. And so the survey consisted of 4 different sections: introductory, demographics, KPIs, and swim lanes. And so based on not only distributing the survey at the conference, but also our subject matter experts also helped us distribute the survey through their networks. And we got a total of 241 usable survey responses. And then just to give a little more insight for the purposes of this model, we focused on 32 of the survey questions, they in particular map back to the pillars and swim lanes that we've created. Next slide, please. And so to score the projects, we elicited weights from the subject matter experts using AHP, which is analytical hierarchy process, at an in-person team meeting. And so for this, what we did was we got all of the subject matter experts in a room, and based on the definitions that Vince already called out, we put those definitions up and got the inputs of each subject matter expert on what the weighting of each pillar should be. And so after a conversation and just dialogue that kind of helped get to one common weight for each pillar, then the survey responses were coded and matched to each swim lane based on those agreed upon weights. And for some of the responses, we needed to use permutation tables, and Vince will kind of go into more detail about what that consisted of. And then after the survey responses were coded and matched to each swim lane and each pillar, projects were first scored by swim lane and then totaled. The scores based on the swim lane were totaled to get the overall project score. Next slide.
So just a quick look to kind of show our math. We're not going to go through a whole score, but if you take a look at the screen here, you can see that on the left side, we have raw weights for each of the pillars that were normalized. And then on the right side, we have raw weights for each of the swim lanes within the pillars that was normalized. And then scoring based on each question. So each question was mapped to a scale that was three possible answers for gold, silver, bronze. And then these weights were elicited from our subject matter expert team through various ways and used to score the project. So somebody would answer the question on creation, say that it was a partial answer. They said maybe or partially. We would get the silver score times it by the normalized weight, added up across the pillar, and then add up final pillar scores to get a final score out of 100 points, which would score the total collaboration on the project for the industry person taking the survey. Next slide, please.
So after scoring all 241 projects, the final scoring revealed that over 53% of the projects were considered gold based on our model. And so in the gold, silver, bronze groupings were formed using K-means analysis. And so if you look at the chart at the bottom, you can see what the score of each project had to be to fall into each category. So for example, for gold, the minimum score you could have was 76.76, and the max score was 98.25. And again, this is based on the 241 results that survey responses that we received. And then it also shows you in this chart the projects per bin. So just again, how many projects fell into the gold, silver, or bronze category. And the histogram also shows you that, but just in the version of a chart. And so as there were many more projects ranking gold than expected, we validated our research using sensitivity analysis. You can go to the next slide. And so just another comment as well. This kind of showed us that not necessarily that there was anything wrong with our model, but that, oh, maybe a lot more industry professionals feel that they're at the gold level versus ranking themselves maybe more honestly, or maybe just assuming that they're at that highest level. And so we used sensitivity analysis to kind of validate and make sure that our model was kind of doing what we wanted it to do. So the general purpose of sensitivity analysis is to understand the behavior and outputs of a model, and then be able to further evaluate if it is in fact the appropriate model to use for your data set. So essentially for this analysis, we're looking to identify the stability of the overall collaborative scheduling model. And so what this chart shows is on the x-axis, it shows 0.05 to 95. And what we're doing here is we're altering the assigned weights by the subject matter experts from on a scale of 0.05 to 95 to see how much the projects alter based on the changes of the weights. And so the point of this, you really, in order to show that your model is stable, you want to show as little crossing of the projects as possible. And so we picked 10 projects randomly, and you can see on the right in the legend, you can see, for example, R42 for that project, the score for the creation swim lane was 25.63. And you can kind of just see where each project fell. So it's definitely a good variety of project scores. And if you look at the chart, it shows very minimal crossing, which is what we were looking for, just to show that our model was in fact stable. And you also want to look at the number in between each weight. You want to make sure that it's not crossing too early on in the weight shifting, because then that also shows a little bit of instability in your model. But based on the sensitivity analysis we conducted, and we did this for all swim lanes, we felt good about the amount of crossing that we see. And it just shows us that, again, maybe more individuals felt that their project was in the gold level, but also knowing that there's always more room for improvement. Next slide.
Okay, so trying to wrap up quickly here. Like we had talked about, we created the model here with our pillars and swim lanes. Our second phase was to create the survey or the scoring model that we tested with the industry survey. We validated that and our results from the scoring. And then our last phase here was coming up with recommendations for people after they score their project, not just overall, but each individual swim lane, so they can improve themselves by swim lane and by pillar. So if you glance at the screen right here, you can see the creation swim lane in the first pillar. And the bronze score would be that the schedule was only created for contractual deliverable and then was not used. And then we went back to our industry partners and did, literary investigating to come up with these recommendations at a silver, gold, and then a gold plus level, which, as you saw, many people scored gold, or so they thought they scored gold. So we created gold plus so that they can continue to ensure that they stay at the gold level and make consistent practices moving forward for collaboration. Next slide, please. So for our conclusion, our collaborative scheduling model defined collaborative behaviors working off of the RT343 definition and the variables to consider, as well as where they're categorized by our industry experts. Our scoring model can be used to score projects real time. You can use it for milestones and at project conclusion to measure your project collaboration. And then you can read your scores and use the industry impacts for improvements and lesson learned on future projects. So we wanted this tool to be able to be used for any projects and, eventually maybe become universal. Last slide.
And then, so for next steps, what we wanted to do was dig deeper into the demographic data versus collaborative responses. So just trying to map like what kind of person responded in which way, and see if we could make other further connections in our data. Then another thing was to actually develop the self-scoring tool that can be used during or after a project to kind of use it actively and make sure that you're adjusting the way that you're working as you go. And then lastly, produce a paper on data validation for the model and industry impacts. And next slide.
And so that's it. These are our references. We want to thank Dr. Scala and thank you, Dominique, for a great 18 months. It's fun to work on this project together.
Yes, thank you.
All right, questions for Vince and Dominique. Just take them really quick because they went a little over time. Any questions, please? Okay. Yeah?